Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to have you all here. My name is Kristen Thompson. I am a program analyst here at Aussie, helping to support the IDEA Part B grant. And so it's so great to have you all here this afternoon for our FY25 IDEA Part B grant application webinar for Phase 1. So let's get started. So for the agenda for today, we will review the purpose, overview, and general requirements for IDEA, and also the Phase 1 assurances, including an overview of changes to different parts of the application, which might include the GEPA statement and the MOE eligibility. And we're going to wrap up with a Q&A segment, and that'll be the plan for today. Purpose, overview, and general requirements of IDEA. The purpose of the IDEA grant is to guarantee that students with disabilities from ages 3 through 21 are provided with comprehensive support to meet their educational and developmental needs. Specifically, the grant aims to ensure access to FAPE, or free appropriate public education, that's customized to address the unique needs of each student, and also to prepare those students for successful transition into further education, meaningful employment, and independent living. There are 2 IDEA grants for which local education agencies in DC are eligible. Both grants serve the same purpose, but are for different age groups. Section 611 provides funding for the provision of supplemental special education and related services to students with qualifying disabilities ages 3 through 21. And Section 619 provides funding for the provision of supplemental special education and related services to students with qualifying disabilities ages 3 through 5. The IDEA Part B grant application consists of 2 parts, and those parts are released at different windows. The Phase 1 assurances, which will be released in June, requires LEAs to commit to specific agreements as condition for receiving IDEA funds. And the consolidated application, which will be released in July, provides LEAs with their specific IDEA allocations. And it's then that you can outline the budget plans for the expenditure of those funds. And so this presentation today will only focus on the Phase 1 assurances application and the changes to that application for the upcoming fiscal year. Phase 1 assurances. The IDEA Phase 1 application consists of the items below: program-specific assurances, reporting assurances, the GEPA section, and the maintenance of effort eligibility. And you'll see that the sections which have changes made are noted in red. And so considering the assurances, the first step in being awarded IDEA funds is for the LEA to confirm that they will abide by a set of assurances tied to the IDEA grant. To do this, the LEA must log on to EGMS, or Enterprise Grants Management System, and review the set of assurances outlined in the Phase 1 application. And Aussie will release the application on June 1st. LEAs will have 30 calendar days to review and submit the Phase 1 application to confirm that their LEA will comply with the key grant requirements outlined in the assurances. An LEA must agree to all assurances to be awarded an IDEA grant for the fiscal year. And most importantly, your award period begins on July 1st, or the date that your Phase 1 application is approved by Aussie, whichever is later. So that is when LEA can begin to obligate their funds. Any expenses obligated prior to the start of the award period are not eligible for the grant. Overview of changes to the Phase 1 application are outlined below. So there are changes to the program-specific tab, the General Education Provisions Act, or GEPA form, and then lastly to the Maintenance of Effort Eligibility tab. And so we'll go over those in just a second. Program-specific assurances. So the program-specific assurances tab has been separated into two tabs. DCPS has specific assurances, and now they have their own separate dedicated tab, as you can see in this screenshot from EGMS. But please note that all LEAs, including DCPS, must still complete the assurances under the program-specific assurances tab. A common reason applications are sometimes rejected is because the LEAs overlook assurance number 5 regarding coordination with the National Instructional Materials Access Center. It can appear that it is a part of assurance number 4, and all LEAs are required to respond to this assurance. And you can see a screenshot of what that assurance number 5 looks like in ETMS, and why some people may mistake it as being a part of number 4, but it's required for all LEAs. The General Education Provision Act statements, questions from the previous GEPA form are now included in phase 1 of the IDA Part B application. There have been no modifications to the questions that LEAs are required to answer. You must identify the extent to which barriers prevent equitable access to or participation in federally funded activities, and describe how those barriers are to be removed. So you'll be asked to describe your entity's existing mission and policies, identify what barriers may impede equitable access to those, and then a plan for addressing those barriers and a timeline for when those barriers will be addressed. Maintenance of effort eligibility. For the purpose of establishing the LEA's eligibility for an award for a fiscal year, OSSI must determine that the LEA budgets for the education of children with disabilities is at least the same amount from SPED local funds as the LEA spent from the same source for the most recent fiscal year for which information is available and met MOE compliance. If an LEA did not meet MOE compliance in the most recent year for which information is available, the LEA must use the latest year MOE compliance was met to compare to the current year local budget. Please keep in mind that federal funds are excluded from an LEA's MOE, and expenditures made from federal funds cannot be considered in determining whether an LEA meets the MOE eligibility requirement. Continuing on with MOE, LEAs must complete the following section in EGMS for the 2 methods used to determine MOE eligibility, including total local funds and per capita amount of local funds. And if an LEA fails to meet the MOE eligibility standard by either method, one can proceed on to the allowable exceptions and adjustments tab, which we'll talk about in just a second. But I do want to give Megan the opportunity to explain this slide a little bit more and what we're seeing in EGMS.
Thanks, Kristen. Hi, everyone. Kristen, is it possible for you to zoom into the slide just a little?
Yes. 1 second. My apologies. Zoom in.
Okay, it's fine. I'll let you work on that. Hi, everyone. So I would say for as far as all the changes related to the phase 1 application, this is where you're probably going to see the biggest change. This is very different from how LEAs have been reporting MOE eligibility in prior years. And we've revised this portion of the application to better align with federal regulations. So in the application for this year, LEAs are going to enter information for 2 methods used to determine MOE eligibility. They're the same 2 methods for determining MOE compliance, so you all are kind of working on that now, so you'll see that there are some similarities. So option 1 is going to be determining MOE eligibility using the total local funds method, and then the second option is going to be the per capita method. So for the total local funds, what you're going to enter is your FY25 budget or your projected budget. I'm not sure if all LEAs have established their upcoming local budget. If you're working on projected numbers right now, then you can also enter the projected numbers. And what you're going to be comparing your FY25 local budget to are the expenditures from the most recent year in which you met MOE compliance for total expenditures. So for instance, some of you are working, well, everyone should be working on the MOE compliance right now. You're more than welcome to finish completing that workbook, which is due June 2nd. And that workbook will help you determine if you met MOE compliance for total or per capita. If the workbook determines you did not meet it for total expenditures, maybe you met it for per capita, but in your submission last year, you met it for total expenditures, then you're going to want to go back to that year and pull that total expenditures number. So it's going to be the most recent year in which you met MOE compliance for total expenditures. Now, the second option is going to look at your per capita. So what you'll do is take your projected budget or your FY25 budget, and you're going to divide that by child count that was recently submitted back in, I think it was between October and December of this past year. So your FY24 child count. And that's going to give you an estimate of your per capita, how much money you're spending per student with disability. And then you're going to compare that. So once again, that MOE compliance, you're going to compare it to the most recent year in which you met MOE compliance for per capita. So say for the past 2 years, you met MOE compliance only through total expenditures. And maybe 3 years ago, you met it for per capita. You would need to go back and pull that per capita amount from 3 years ago to compare. Now, I know this sounds like a lot because it is. And some of you, if you're new to the grants world or just new to the LEA and you're not sure what's the most recent year I met per capita, feel free to reach out to us. We have documentation and have tracked it across multiple years for all LEAs, and we're happy to assist you with the most recent year and also the expenditures number or data that you would need to input into the application. And so in doing all of that, the system will tell you, once you hit save, it will tell you if you met MOE or if you did not meet MOE. If the LEA fails to meet MOE eligibility standard by either method, so you put in all of your information and it says you did not meet it for total expenditures or per capita, there are some options that you can explore that may be able to help you potentially meet MOE eligibility. And I'll let Kristen talk about that in the upcoming slides.
Again.
But Chris, I just want to wait because that was a lot and I kind of want to pause here for a second.
Yes.
Does anyone have any questions right now? Okay. Oh, there we go. Can you take Michael off mute for me? Michael, you may be able to let yourself off mute now. Can you give it a try? Okay. Michael, are you able to come off mute? Okay. We'll circle back towards the end. So if you have a question, just hold that thought and we'll open it up for Q&A. Kristen, I'll let you move forward.
Stated, an LEA may reduce its MOE via allowable exceptions if any of the four allowable exceptions below apply, including the voluntary departure or retirement or otherwise of a special education related or related service personnel, the decrease in the enrollment of children with disabilities, the termination of the obligation to provide a program of special education to a particular child with a disability if that child has left the LEA or has reached the age at which the obligation of the agency to provide FAPE has been terminated, or that child no longer needs the program of special education. And lastly, the termination of costly expenditure for long-term purchases, such as the acquisition of equipment or the construction of school facilities. If one is applying for an allowable exception, you are required to complete the MOE reduction calculator worksheet and upload supporting documentation of your LEA's applicable allowable exceptions for OSSE's review.
Kristen, I'm going to pause here for a second. So Kristen mentioned the MOE reduction calculator worksheet that will be available by the time the application goes live. It's essentially an Excel workbook. So say, for instance, I'll just give an example for if your exception that you want to apply for is the voluntary departure. So say you have a veteran special education teacher who's retiring and they're maybe being replaced by a less experienced special education teacher. So if the LEA expended $150,000 on that veteran's salary in the previous year, but that person's salary is no longer a part of your FY25 budget because you're maybe paying that less experienced person a lower salary, say $90,000. The LEA can reduce their level of effort by the difference between those two people's salaries. So if the veteran's salary is $150,000 and the new person's salary is $90,000, there's a $60,000 difference. So you can reduce the level of effort that you need to budget or meet. And if that brings you to MOE compliance, then that would be allowable. There'll be an MOE reduction calculator worksheet where you would enter that staff person's name, their position, and their salary. And then you can enter the person that's replacing them, just so that we can determine how much you can reduce your MOE reduction obligation. And of course, if you have any questions about completing this worksheet or any questions about this, feel free to reach out to Kristen or myself.
Adjustments. And so if the LEA receives an increase of 611 funds, it may reduce its level of effort by no more than 50% of the amount of the increase. Under the condition that the LEA has met the following requirements: they have provided FAPE for children with disabilities. They have a determination level of meets requirements. Those determination levels can be found in the LEA's Special Education Performance Report. And that LEA has not been identified as having significant disproportionality. And so to provide an example of this, let's say in a previous fiscal year, an LEA received $500,000 in 611 funds, and in the current fiscal year, the LEA receives $600,000 in 611 funds. If that LEA meets the requirements for an allowable adjustment, it can reduce its level of effort by 50% of that increase. And so an increase between $500,000 and $600,000 is $100,000, and 50% of that would be $50,000. So considering that adjustment, and that LEA could potentially reduce its level of effort by $50,000. And that concludes our presentation, but there is time for questions. If folks have questions, feel free to use the raise hand feature to be unmuted. Give me 1 second. And Michael, your mic is enabled. So if you press the unmute button, you should be able to ask your question. If it's also easier, you can put your question in the chat as well.
Does anyone else have any questions? Michael, are you still unable to take yourself off mute? Myra, we did record a copy of, we did record this webinar, and so we'll make sure this information is posted along with the slides. Another thing that I will note is we are very close to having a MOE eligibility supplemental guide being finalized so that we can post that to the website as well. And it gives a step-by-step of how to complete the revised MOE section. So hopefully that will be a really good supplement that you all can use as you walk through it. More than likely, it'll be available on the website next week. And yes, Myra, MOE is very confusing for everyone. Okay, I'm getting some other emails about the mic.
The mic, my mic?
Yeah, no, people being able to come off mute.
Okay. So if folks can use the raise hand feature, and I can unmute your mic. Teams has this automatic feature for webinars, which mutes everyone who's not a host. So forgive us. And the chat is also an option.
If you can try to unmute Rashida Davis, if she's still on, and try to give Michael one more try. Rashida, Michael, if you're not successful, feel free to reach out to us via email and we can give you a call.
Rashida, you should be able to try now. And Michael as well.
Hey, thanks so much. This is Mike. Appreciate it. I was having trouble both accessing the chat and the mic, so it's
okay.
A bit impossible to communicate. So thank you for fixing that. Just a quick question about the MOE and the year that we're utilizing. So you had mentioned that we should use the expenditure totals from the most recent workbook, but that would be FY23 numbers in the most recent SPED
Yes.
MOE. So are we comparing FY25 budget to FY23 expenditures for the purpose of meeting MOE? We wouldn't have FY24, which is typically its current year versus previous year.
Yeah.
Is it allowable to use FY23 numbers as the baseline then?
Yes.
Okay.
So you'll use 23. You'll use 23 numbers. It's considered FY24 MOE, but because it's based on 23, and so next year is when you'll be reporting on this year's expenditures. But to your point, you won't have FY24 until later. So that'll be used for next year's grant application.
Okay, and then just to clarify, so when you are asking for the FY25 numbers, what is the time period that you're requesting it? What are the dates of that? Just so it aligns with school budgets. Yeah. I'm just trying to.
Sure. So your FY25, it's going to be, so FY25 is from, it's going to be your upcoming fiscal year. So from October 1, 24 until September 30th, 25. That's why you're also allowed to use your projected budget as well. if you want to enter those numbers.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Rashida, do you still have a question?
Hi, good afternoon. No, I didn't have any questions. What I was saying was, this wasn't the
okay.
first time.
Okay.
Aussie Teams meeting has not allowed users to speak, so I'm not sure if it's the way you guys have been setting it up, but sometimes we aren't able to, unmute.
Got it. Thank you. We will definitely work on that next time and take that back to the team. Are there any additional questions? Everyone feels prepared to complete this application starting next week?
So you can give us a thumbs up reaction if you're feeling really confident. I'm not seeing a lot of thumbs up. Alas, thank you. Yes, thank you, Marjorie, for dropping that in the chat. So if folks have questions or need follow-up support when they begin working on the application, you can feel free to reach out to Megan or myself. Our information is here, showcased here. And so we hope that we can be of support to you as you are navigating this revised EGMS application. And we thank you once again for participating in today's webinar. And we're excited, very excited for next week. So thank you all.